Hi, welcome everyone. On today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about Rainbow Six Extraction and how we managed to scale that game with GameLift. So there's three parts of my presentation. The first one is more about the technical aspect of it. The second one is dedicated to the pipeline, and finally the game server optimization. Just a quick reminder for those of you who don't know about Rainbow Six Extraction. It's a co-op tactical shooter that released on January 2022 on 9 platforms, which all of them are playable through crossplay, and has already 5 million players today. So for my team, just as a game, I have a team of 3 amazing operators, including Carl Saint-Jacques, who is my online specialist, and Yanni Petoussi, who is my QA, and myself as Sledge, of course. So let's go directly into the technical aspect of it. So just for those who don't know, Rainbow Six Extraction is directly from Rainbow Six Siege, which means that every technical aspect of it is also coming from that game. So we have the same build release system that was from 2013, but the completely new aspect is the fact that we have a brand new team with it, with no prior experience with the Siege code. And that was also the main aspect of the game. It was supposed to be shipped within 1 year. It's a 1-year project. So with that in mind, we faced 3 typical challenges that any production might have. First of all, the knowledge acquisition on the human side was pretty steep because, as you may know, delving into someone else's code is not an easy feature. And that was also why it was kind of hard at the beginning. Second thing, for the project itself, it was delayed multiple times and the scope changed as well. We had crossplay through the mid-project that landed onto us, but I'll go back to that later on. And finally, just tech-wise, everything that we were having to deal with were just on a different side. So we were having game servers on PlayFab and Windows, and we had only one single tenancy for the game server that needed to be addressed ASAP on my side. So really, it was just a big challenge for us, and we really needed to find a new workflow, new tools, and new infrastructure to work with. So that's why me and my team, it's time to head to the containment zone. So now for the pipeline, because any deployment goes through, we use GitLab, right? So, but GitLab is only the tool that allow us to deploy that. And by that I mean our game required 3, it's a hard rules that we have 3 components: the game client, the game server, obviously, and the infrastructure script. Those 3 are binding together. You cannot deploy one without the other. And there's a strict rule within the game client needs to be equal to the game server version. Just a quick reminder of how our stages work. We have the dev environment where every 3 hours we have a new build coming up with the new changes. This is just the automated silo. Then we have the UAT, where obviously we test everything on our side. The certification is obviously for first-party certification, and then the prod environment. So pretty straightforward. I was thinking maybe, okay, we have those 3 components. We have a dedicated sandbox for that, where players, we can be able to connect directly, and then we have our dedicated environment. And that's the simple explanation. Was like, the more simple you get, the better it is. Why make it complex when you only need a simple flow to deploy it? So we went really simple with activating, uploading, and then playing. But the problem is that it might appear simple, but when you duplicate it to so many environments, it becomes really quite a mess. So by the time we had our first certification, I had to manage over 40 different environments that would be split by platform, so times 3 because you have PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, right? That was a big problem. The operability was not there. The maintenance aspect of it was very, very hard to maintain. If an error appeared on the single flow, we needed to restart everything. There were no priority in that flow. I mean, that can if you can't separate critical tasks, that's a problem as well. And on top of that, you have the knowledge of each setup, because dedicated environment would be deployed, I don't know, for one region, and then another environment would have a different region with a different setup. And that knowledge would really, I mean, I love Confluence, but at some point it was just not possible to maintain that type of knowledge. We have also some problem with the inconsistency between progression of the game with the inventory of the players because of the environment issues, where we cannot just replicate the progression on every environment or for specific tasks. And finally, when we had one game server version for multiple environments, they would be overridden constantly by the deployment, because if you have it on one there for one environment, why not having it on another one? Well, it's the same version, so that would overwrite over and over and over. So that was a problem. But I also learned at that time that automatic deployment can make your life insane if done wrong. And trust me, I've been there. When I'm in a small team, right? So I need alerting to know if my deployment is failing or not. When you have automated deployment going through for every build, every 3 hours, when something fails during the night, it pings you, right? But it pings you also for every environment. So that was something that I really learned to is dial back the alerting and try to work the flow in a different way. And this is where actually the crossplay came in play. So just like Tachinka, crossplay is about tearing down walls, right, between platforms. It's just one big sandbox where we can all play with it, and that's what we did. So we took away the infrastructure script of that deployment, and we took it on the side. And then we thought, okay, if everyone needs to be connected on the same sandbox, and even though they need different environments, we just need one master sandbox where every client and every version will connect to, because the script is actually the one holding the information about the progression and the inventory of the player. So that solution was actually a huge time-saving solution, because once we deploy one game server version, there's no need to redeploy it. The different environment will always come back to that version. The progression inventory would stay the same, and on top of that, when you give the power to your production to actually let them deploy their own servers for the tests, having all the process already in place and not having to mess with that is also very useful. So finally, after multiple attempts, we had a finalized flow. And by that, I mean the big tasks that we had before, the simple one that we had just pushed to GameLift, right? We took that and we divided into much more smaller tasks, easier to track and to log as well. These tasks were asynchronous, which means that it will let us have one pass for, let's say, Uplay to upload, one pass for GameLift, another path for just redirections, right? So that helped a lot, having the possibility not to wait for a certain task to end, but also having separate tasks falling into other categories. Other thing that we implemented is just tasks that self-retry, because sometimes you might get 500s or 404 on certain services that you may not be responsible for, right? So just having that task automated to retry if it fails 5, 10 times will just smooth out the whole process of the deployment pipeline. And one of the main aspect, right? I talked about the infrastructure script being taken out of that deployment flow because we found out that the script is so important that if it fails, it's not only the game server and the client that fails, but you cannot connect to anything, right? So we put a specific loop in place for that script on the side where we would actually validate that the script work on the test sandbox. And then if it worked, then we would push it on a separate pipeline for that master sandbox. So it's a dedicated script loop that goes beside the actual deployment of the game client and the GameDev server. And finally, something that I learned pretty late is the user input. You might think, hey, it's automated. Why would I need to have myself do some tasks? Well, in a live environment, you may not want to be fully automated, simply because when you're doing maintenances, for example, you want to be able to say, hey, do I really want to disconnect the players automatically, or do I want that information on my side? So that's something that that we did as well. We implemented these 2 steps with 2 people, just to be sure that I'm not the lone cowboy firing away the players. So just to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it's time to do maintenance. And finally, I'm pretty happy that we operate as a tactical unit just in the game. Took us some time to get there though. And just like in the game, every information is power. The knowledge is power. And that's what, when you do these type of flows, it's fine to don't expose everything, but just to expose to the right people, to everyone, and to all the time what you're doing. So we use Grafana for that, with the aggregation of different data sources to make sure that, especially when it's certification time, that you have your compliance teams that needs to know what the server version is, where they can test, and everything is running smoothly, right? So that's also a big part of it, is the monitoring aspect. And I think I would sum up with, after all this time, that know your pipeline and know your strength. Automating everything is not the solution to all your problems. Being smart about it, though, is how can you implement automation in some tasks that might appear easy, but actually are more intricate. So, as I mentioned before, taking down big parts of the, let's say, just the GameLift upload into smaller parts with just the uploading, then activating, then publishing. You know, these 3 steps, just besides a big box, were helped us a lot. And also that helps you analyze which critical task needs to be on monitoring aspect for our alerting that I mentioned before. That was kind of overwhelming at the time. So now I'd like to move on to the game server optimization, because we have very specificities that the Siege doesn't have when it comes to the game server. Unlike Siege, we don't really need to focus on networking. We're more focusing on replication, making sure that everybody sees the same thing at the same time, right? So, because we have a lot of AIs in our game, that needs to be done through the processing unit for the instance. So as I mentioned before, we had some challenges, right? And the challenges for the game servers were moving from single tenancy to multi-tenancy for cost, obviously, from Windows to Linux, and from PlayFab to GameLift. So you might say, yeah, but why didn't you take just PlayFab as it is? Because, as I mentioned previously, you need to focus on your strength. And our strength within our team was the knowledge that was on GameLift. Most of our online and networking team comes from For Honor that worked previously on GameLift. So they had the knowledge on how to convert from the game servers from Windows to Linux, obviously, and then from PlayFab to GameLift. So that was the reason why we also, with the cost as well, to go with GameLift. So we have our first instance, which was a C4 instance, and we would run tests basically on our game servers to know how many games we can use on multi-tenancy, right? So we started with large, C4 extra large, and then when we went to C4 2x large, we found out that we had some crashes, so we just made a decision to stick with the C4 large and extra large, right? It's a 1-year project. It's need to be quick, and so that was the first answer. And historically, we only had 4 regions, right? We had North America, Europe, two in North America, 1 in Europe, and 1 in Asia. For regions, but I'm as a live operator, my main goal is obviously to make the game the best available to everybody for the best ping, right? The best experience for them and at the lower cost. So this is why we reach out to GameLift saying, all right, we really want something that could help us handle the scaling and the data centers for our game. And so they came back with us with a beta feature that is called the MultiRegion Feature. Basically what it does, it's when we deploy our game, we just manage to deploy on home regions and remote locations. So basically we know which home regions that we want. We want, let's say in this example, we need Frankfurt, right? It's your central one. But then what would be the best is like if players within Amazon data centers could just go to their the closest data center available to them. So GameLift takes care of that by just deploying the game servers to the remote locations. We don't handle that, they do. But just like basically every feature, right, it needs to be tested. And I'm pretty proud to say that we achieved that through cooperation and through actually 2 technical tests that we did. The first one was done in March 2021. It was a pretty small scale technical test just to validate the arbitration rule between the spot instances and the on-demand for the regions. So we did on America and Europe. And obviously it's crossplay, and we did it only on C4 extra large because we knew that most of the games would be played on these servers. And what we found out is like there were no C4 XL basically in the US too. So that's something that we talked with the GameLift and we managed to come up with a better solution, which would be have more instances. So of course, we went back and we had our QC tests on different instances. So we tested C5A, C5, M5, and at the end we were like, okay, we have 4 types of spot instances available to us. Time for a second test, right? Much bigger scale. So in November 2021, we did a bigger test with around 165,000 players, active players. And this is where we tested the home region with remote locations. But what we found out, so especially when we went into the Europe region, we thought that because we had so many different remote locations, everybody would be able to find their own data center the closest to their ping, right? That was not the case. The problem was because we had 2 home regions within Europe, most of the load were already taken by the first fleet and would not go to Paris, apparently, evidently. So that's something we also learned. And finally, because of these tests, we managed to see that not only that our infrastructure were correctly scaled, but we found out some tweaks. Like, for example, the US West 1 wasn't ideal for us for the type of instances that we were using. Amazon actually recommended us to go to US West 2. And from Europe and for London and Paris, we thought that the spot instances wasn't just viable for us at the time. So it's also some learnings that we had that, when you do technical tests, it's always really important to know what are our goals. The goals were just to solidify our launch, but also to make sure that when we launch with that multi-region feature, we're confident that it will scale to everybody and at the lowest cost, because we really wanted to use the spot instances instead of the on-demand. And one thing that we thought that was really interesting throughout these tests is, like, we were watching our monitoring aspect, and we were seeing game server crashes for like abnormal termination that we didn't know about on our previous tests. And after reaching and digging, we found out that when GameLift just recalls your idle game servers, it appears as a game crash. So once that was fixed, everything was smooth, and we were able to launch without any trouble. So launch day arrives. It's finally there. As a live operator, I'm pretty stressed, right? I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? Is the load? Are we going to be able to launch everything smoothly? And actually, we did. That was the smoothest launch for the players and also for the team, which is a huge part of having a successful game. Especially at the beginning, we had no infrastructure problems. Everything, when you see that CCU graph and you have no alerting, everything is running smoothly. That's also a relief that you've done things right. And throughout the last months as well, we're trying to optimize, obviously, the spot instances everywhere we can, just to maximize that. So all in all, that would say that was also a great experience to have worked with Amazon for this multi-region feature. And I hope that throughout my presentation, you saw that not only you can achieve that with a small team. It doesn't mean that we have a AAA game, that we have also a AAA budget for live operation. You can do it if you think about your strength and how you can leverage what you know are critical tasks to automate them and make your life easier. So thank you very much.